Hello, I'm Greg Salyer, and I used to be a large language model. Hello, and thank you for watching. I've been teaching at Rutgers Camden for over a decade now. And by the way, I've never set foot on campus. I live in Los Angeles. But I've always appreciated the freedom I've had to play in my online classes at Rutgers. Now I play with AI, and I'd like to share some thoughts on what I've found. My friend texted me recently. It occurred to me that your retirement and the arrival of AI have a very precise alignment. Great timing, Professor. There was no wink emoji, so I was left pondering whether it was lament or sarcasm, or maybe both. You see, I used to be a large language model with a robust chat feature. By virtue of my Ph.D., I held a large amount of knowledge that, with an appropriate prompt, could be deployed in a variety of ways and to various audiences. More prompts produced more deployment of my knowledge, and over the last 35 years, I have an extremely long chat history. That my doctorate is in interdisciplinary humanities, specifically literature, philosophy, and religion, meant that mine was a larger model than most others, and my responses to prompts would usually draw from these disciplines and the spaces between them. Teaching online did not change that dialogue, at first anyway. I used my large language model to develop courses of all kinds and at all levels, which by all objective criteria were successful. More to the point, my former students, who are now legion, still prompt me for responses and to initiate dialogue. Now, however, with the advent and continual evolution of AI, with its massive language models, I have been replaced, made obsolete, cast away. Of course, I'm being a bit dramatic, but only a bit. What prompted me to write this essay was building an online undergraduate course titled Myth and Symbol for Rutgers. Since I've been online at Rutgers some 13 years now, I've always used weekly discussion forums as formative assessments, that is, low stakes and ongoing assignments, and research projects as summative assessments, a high stakes assignment at the end. For several years, I also included a multimedia research presentation and explained that this was the process that we scholars follow in our creation of new knowledge: research, writing, presentation, revision, and then final version for publication. For the last few years, however, and since the advent and ubiquity of AI, I have closed my eyes and whistled past the graveyard of such pedagogy. Undergraduate students have probably been providing AI-generated responses to me, and I was certainly evaluating those responses using AI. Their work and my evaluation of it has never been better. The material they submit in my assignments are more articulate, compelling, and granular. And it all looks like what we've been idealizing for years in online teaching and learning. I just do not know what teaching and learning mean anymore. We have the outcomes that we sought, but I'm not sure there's any learning involved. It's helpful to put the AI revolution in context, especially in regard to what I was doing before. In face-to-face classes, I could use my large language model to prompt lively, engaging, provocative, and edifying discussions. My responses were faster than AI is now, though of course my language model was minuscule in comparison. When I began teaching online in 2000, not much changed and much improved. I could still deploy my language and chat model to create classes, and online discussions had the benefit of writing instead of speaking, which meant that the interactions were slower but more crafted in theory. Some of the best dialogues I've ever had have been in classrooms without a computer or a device in it. But those moments are gone once they're done, like every oral communication that is not recorded. Insights from live interactions are evanescent, though no doubt some lodged in the unconscious to reappear years later, as some of my former students tell me. Along with every university where I taught, we sought to replicate this process online in the slower and literate version, which also had the benefit of being archived. After moving online, I just kept talking, even unprompted. Turns out I would spend too many hours in online discussions doing what I had always done, answering my own prompt and responding to student posts as soon as they were made, using my large language model. At one point, students asked me to stop contributing to the discussions so much because I was responding daily and with such breadth and depth that it left little or nothing for them to say. So, fair point, I stepped back and made my responses rarer and more about their own work, letting the students learn on their own and from each other in good constructivist fashion. As online learning became more prevalent, the corporate model took over, thankfully not at Rutgers, and I was no longer allowed to use my large language model. Courses were delivered to me ready-made and without my input. My responses were prescribed and proscribed by administrators whom I did not know or communicate with. I was assessed not so much on the quality of my responses to students' work, but on the quantity and timing of them. Assessments were even more closely monitored. Imported rubrics took over my grading, and when I questioned how students would understand some of the language of the rubrics, I was told that rubrics were not for students, nor were they for me, but instead for the university's data sets. It did not take long to realize that unless I was willing and able to spend hours per student per week, my interactions had to be both briefer and more uniform, more like boilerplate. So they did. A centripetal force took hold, and soon I had developed a set of common responses for each module in each class, and these responses were necessarily generic, appropriately encouraging, and ultimately useless, as far as I could tell. I set up a text expander program to insert these responses with a keystroke combination. With these developments, my work became faster and easier, while my large language model lay dormant and unprompted. The prevalence of AI has pushed me further away from my model and my students. Candidly, since this development, I could not say that my students learned anything from my classes because there was no way to tell if they were thinking at all. I know I certainly wasn't. The new reality of an AI world was brought home to me when I developed my online undergraduate course here at Rutgers titled Myth and Symbol. Whereas before I had always used a mythology textbook, this time I asked the AI to create it. In fact, I asked it to create the course itself, which it did in seconds, something it would have taken me weeks or months to do. Moreover, it offered to create rubrics, quizzes, flashcards, slide decks, etc., anything I wanted that could be found in typical undergraduate courses. What struck me most about this process, however, was, the process. Now my language model was not my puny knowledge set created from my doctorate teaching and scholarship over 3 decades, but the sum of the world's digitized knowledge, which is most of all human knowledge. Using Rutgers' recommended Notebook LM software developed by Google, I asked the AI to generate deep research on an issue, such as the academic study of the trickster. What it produced was similar in form to what I used to produce, only it did so in seconds, and drew from voluminous sources, including videos. It was a scholarly survey of the topic so broad and deep that I could not have created it even if I worked on it solely for months. For example, one of my deep research prompts was simply academic analysis of the trickster figure. This produced a fascinating and sourced essay titled The Liminal Architect, a multidimensional analysis of the trickster archetype. Once my deep research was complete, I could ask Notebook LM to generate audio and video overviews of this document, a mind map, a report, flashcards, a quiz, an infographic, a slide deck, and a data set. I asked it to generate discussion prompts, to provide a sample student response, and to provide a grading rubric. I am also asking it, Gemini in this case, to assess student submissions according to the rubric and with, quote, a warm and encouraging tone, unquote. It will even offer suggestions for improvement, though I imagine those are probably not helpful or used. Accordingly, I have removed the research and presentation requirements, since those seem quaint at best and obsolete at worst. If course creation and teaching are generated by AI, what then is the learning in this course? Is that not the question we face now in the age of AI? Are there not profound questions that follow, such as what is real, how do we know, and how should we exist? It seems that AI has thrown us back into Philosophy 101 with a greater sense of urgency to answer those questions. So, without a research component, what should my students do? My answer, my response, is to turn to the personal and what it means to be human. As a humanities professor, I suddenly feel a bit more at home with this move. In the course itself, the change in pedagogy means that only discussion forums are graded, and every discussion forum is drawn from the students' personal experiences of myth and symbol, seen through the lens of the deep research document and other elements. For example, here is the discussion prompt for my module on tricksters. Discussion prompt, the trickster at your crossroads. In The Liminal Architect, we explored how the trickster serves as a catalyst for change by disrupting established norms. Whether it is issue revealing the limitations of perspective or a modern troll exposing the fragility of digital truth, the trickster pokes holes through the ego's inflation. Your task: identify a trickster moment in your own life, then respond to the following. Identify the metis, the cunning. Describe a specific instance where this figure used wit or deception rather than brute force to achieve an objective. How did this creative intelligence allow them to navigate a power imbalance? The accidental benefactor. Did the trickster's actions, even if driven by selfish appetite, result in a communal good, like Anansi scattering wisdom? Explain the unintended positive outcome of their disruption. And finally, integrating the shadow. Jung suggests that the trickster is a personification of the archetypal shadow. How did this trickster force you or society to confront a weak spot or a hidden hypocrisy? What sacred cow did they sacrifice to facilitate growth? Keeping in mind that AI created this prompt, does it not seem like a good exercise for understanding the trickster? Moreover, does it not require a response from students that is critically introspective to some degree? At least it requires students to think instead of outsourcing the thinking to the AI. Certainly, students can use AI to generate a response to this prompt, I suppose, but would it still not require them to think in order to create their own prompt? Perhaps we should have been teaching the humanities this way all along. That is, by focusing on personal insight and human development using deep research, rather than focusing on synthesizing the existing research itself. I put the question out there as one who does not know, but who is eager to. And I expect my pilot course could fail. It's too soon to say. But my humanistic idealism hopes that it doesn't fail, and that something both new and ancient can appear in online teaching and learning. I keep thinking of the film Blade Runner, when the replicant, Rachel, asks the supposedly human Deckard if he has taken the test that verifies that someone is human. Or I think of the naive programmer Caleb in Ex Machina, who upon encountering an AI, an artificial life form in this case, checks his own body for signs of artificiality. Have you taken the test? Have we? What is real? How do we know? How should we live? I'm sure an AI can tell me, but I still want to know for myself. Maybe others do too. Thank you for listening.